This is Andrew Hada from Nothing Ventured Media. I want to tell you about all the feature films we've made and how you can see them right now. The last one is a zombie drama about how a pandemic and isolation could drive a group of people mad. When the virus hits, John finds himself alone and scared until he meets Michael, his protector. But when Karina, another survivor, enters the mix, everything that John and Michael knew will be turned on its head. The last one's a zombie virus movie that's somehow even more relevant today. Plus, it has zombies. Check it out. Borderland is a mexploitation film about living in El Paso. When Sarah finds herself in debt to the cartels, she has until sunrise to find some missing monies with the help of her executioner. Borderland is a true midnight movie and a lot of fun. The documentary Humble Spirits tells the story of the Hahn family, including champion Jennifer Hahn from El Paso, Texas. The entire Hahn family has grown up in the combat sports and has helped shape who they are both in and out of the ring. Humble Spirits, A Family of Fighters, is the perfect documentary for boxing fans of all ages. Finally, The Empty Space, winner of multiple awards, including the Sacramento Horror Film Festival's Best of the Fest, is a cosmic horror about Amy Andrews, who's dealing with anxiety and depression after a violent attack that killed her husband. As she tries to find herself, she starts to lose her grasp on reality. Or could it be something much more sinister? The Empty Space is full of twists and turns, with Grace DeWilder of Rue Morgue magazine calling it a powerful film full of excellent performances by practically every cast member. All of Andrew Hada's movies are available to rent or buy on streaming services such as Tubi, Amazon, and many other places. And if that's not enough for you, Hada Films is home to all of our short films. So take a look around and see what you like. Spend your day with Hada Films and Nothing Ventured Media. Now, let's start the bomb squad. Hello, guys. Welcome to the podcast. We're days away from our supreme leader, who we all love and will never vote against again, takes power. So we wanted to cover something that is related, politically related. I didn't want to do
Yeah.
something that's too on the nose, but we want to talk about something. So today we're gonna find out how insane Andrew is on conspiracy theories as we discuss 1991's. Is it 1991's? Yes, 1991's JFK. This one's gonna be. I'm just gonna bask in these names because they're like the easiest names ever.
Hell yeah,
Directed
familiars.
directed and written by Oliver Stone. Thank you, Oliver Stone. Starring Kevin Costner. That's about it. He's the only person who's really in this movie. Gary Oldman, Jack Lemmon. Oh, and it stars Joe Pesci's eyebrows.
Oh my
Um,
god, yes.
it stars so many people. Like Walter Maddow is in there for a couple of
Oh yeah,
scenes.
this is like the
It's like everyone
Oppenheimer
you've
of the
ever heard of in.
'90s. Like
Yeah.
every big name actor's in it
Yeah,
for
it
5 minutes.
really
Honestly,
is,
like it really is, yeah.
and it contains the same amount of truth. Um, Josh, will you tell us who is it? Who did it last time?
I think it was William.
What was the last movie?
It was William. Man
Man
Bites
Bites
Dog.
Dog.
Oh,
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
Josh. So, William, will you break down this movie? But can you do it from the point of view of the young in whose spirit the search for truth marches on with him?
Yeah, of
As this
course.
movie is dedicated to the.
Yeah, yeah. I'm wrapped up in an enigma as well. Um, so this is a film about blowing wide open the cover up that was the JFK assassination, and it is shouldered by a Louisiana lawyer played by Kevin Costner, who gathers up all of his buddies. He's a DA, and he's noticing some things are not quite adding up with the government story about how JFK died. So he goes on a mission to uncover the truth, and he comes up against a lot of obstacles, and it's hard for him and his family. But it's like, is the truth worth seeking if it's a dangerous truth?
Right, right. Very good. And it was like, so just to give you a little bit of backstory for this movie, Oliver Stone, someone recommended Oliver Stone to read a book by Jim Garrison, and he ended up reading it, and he kind of like they had turned it from like just case by case, here's why I don't think the JFK murder was real, into like kind of a detective story as this Garrison is the DA of New Orleans. He's trying to figure out whether there was government or who was involved with the JFK
Yeah,
assassination. Um, and so he wrote this book. Oliver Stone loved it. He wanted to commission it, and then he kind of went off like for years trying to get this made. It ended up being a huge hit. This is unlike a lot of other. I mean, we're the Bomb Squad. We can't talk about bombs more so often, but I want to cover this movie for two reasons. A, I feel like people don't really talk about this. To me, it's
yeah,
probably one of Oliver Stone's best films. I'm not a huge Oliver Stone fan, but I think this one is interesting in a lot of ways that we'll cover. And
yeah,
two, even though it was a huge hit, people don't really talk about it a lot. There's like that huge movement that Josh is a part of about like they hate long movies, and this movie is
It's
it.
definitely not true.
yeah.
Um,
This is definitely kind of like an
and
infinite jest type thing where it's just like everyone knows it, but it's like, oh yeah, JFK, and then that's
yeah,
the end of the conversation.
yeah, even me, I try to watch this a couple of times, but I am glad I did. But yeah, so as we get into it, just keep in mind that like, and this is there's that other thing where like people talk about a lot like oh movies like this or a movie like this movie wouldn't get made today and this and it's always like Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl. It's like no, a movie where they like let a crazed libertarian like loving communist from Cuba
Yeah,
talk about stuff is like and make his Kennedy was murdered by the government movie and have it star Kevin Costner, one of the biggest stars of
I
the
know.
time.
Right.
Right.
That would be a very hard thing to get made at
Yeah.
this time. And like
Yeah.
when you read about how this movie got made, it was like Warner Brothers was looking for controversial movies and it's like, "Oh, cool. That's what studios wanted back then." And now it's
Right.
like if it doesn't like yesterday the guy who directed The Flash was like it wasn't a four quadrant movie. We're always looking for four quadrant movies, and I was like,
Yeah.
how did you make a Flash movie that wasn't a four quadrant
Right.
movie?
Every superhero movie is automatically a four quadrant
What are
movie.
you talking about? Yeah. And so
Yeah.
like when you're trying to use that justification that this movie wasn't for anyone, when you're making like a very generic, not to shit on the Flash too much, but making a very generic superhero movie, it's like, come on. This is
Yeah.
not a four quadrant movie. This is
No.
literally just for Alex Jones fans
Yeah, this is a quadrant. Yeah, absolutely.
and like rational people. But so yeah, so it's a very strange movie. But that's why I want to talk about it. I think it'd be interesting. So now that we've gotten all that grandstanding out of the way,
Yeah. I mean, I would like to add like one thing too about like why it wouldn't get made. Like
mhm.
also just like the controversy is just like back then it's like Warner Brothers is like, let's find a controversial film because it's interesting. But now it's like the controversy is just like too real. And it's
Yeah.
like so divided now that it's just like if they were to make this movie, it would be like for $1 million and it would have some super fans and some people who really, really hated it.
Yeah, there would be one name actor, and it wouldn't be Kevin Costner. It would be
Yeah.
like this is someone way
They
way
would have
further down the.
they would have never paid that much for Joe Pesci's eyebrows in this film.
No.
For
Didn't
his
get
South Park eyebrows. Yeah.
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 Mr.
But no, and I
Garrison.
think that's true. Like that is that thing where now, we talk a lot about media literacy, and that's one of the reasons we have this podcast to kind of help with that. But people watching that movie would be like, "Oh, does Kevin Costner think this? Let's go ask him. Let's go hand him outside his house to make sure he believes exactly what we need him to believe."
Right.
Or like even posting, "I understand with Palestine" or "I stand with Palestine" got Melissa Barrera fired from Scream, and it's like she can't
Oh,
even
yeah.
support for
Yeah, yeah.
victims.
You
Yeah.
can't even have a separate opinion that's
Yeah.
like too
And
too
so
charged. Yeah.
just to show where it is. But what did you guys think of JFK?
I mean, I had watched this one other time. I think whenever I had like, I think I was like 19, maybe 19. I was just like kind of like discovering the old films for the first time in a way. And I remember it like being pretty cool. Like watching it again this time, I was like, I just knew more about the world, and I was just like, damn, this is like, it's definitely like the step. Like I feel like everyone now knows that the government is like lying to us all the time, and like no one would put it past them to assassinate someone in our country anymore. And like this was kind of like the stepping stone for the stepping Oliver Stone for everyone to kind of like get there in a way. It's just like it's the first, and that's what it's so funny about it having so many huge stars and it being such a big production. But it is kind of like the first time whenever we're like, oh yeah, the government is shady and crafty, And
Yeah, that's like the end of Innocence in a way.
right, yeah. And I think that's really,
Yeah, no,
really important for that.
I agree. I agree. I think it's really well made. I think yeah, I don't like most Oliver Stone movies, but this has less of his flourishes than you would
Totally.
like. It's
It's
almost
pretty
like
straight. Yeah.
more of a drama without a lot of his like, oh, someone feels sick, so the camera's gonna spin around blurry for like
Yeah.
20 minutes, and it's like,
Yeah.
don't do all that. But it doesn't have a lot of that. I do feel um the boomers like do see like just as a generationally, obviously everyone's like a different, but as a whole, boomers see JFK as like a Christ-like figure, and this movie
Right.
like perfectly embodies that. So it's almost like, oh, it's interesting. It's like a political thriller, but it's also interesting to look into like the mindset of like, no, he was like
A
the one
god.
who could save America, and they killed him for it, which is like, you
Totally.
know, we should also just say every conspiracy theory we believe up front. 'Cause I do think the government was involved. I don't know if specifically this group of gay guys killed him,
Well, and
but
as we kind of go along, we can talk about that more.
yeah,
But
yeah, for
there's
Right.
that
sure.
thing where I will say to push it back a little bit on the Oliver Stone. Early Oliver Stone was not as flashy as current Oliver Stone. So like
Yeah.
platoon,
True.
they're all pretty straightforward. This one, you can start seeing the rumblings. That's why I'm sitting in front of this mirror because like every single shot in that movie, every single person has this level of backlight, regardless of how dark the rest of the room is.
Oh, yeah.
There's a scene
Yeah.
where they're having dinner and Kevin Costner's talking. Every time he moves his head, there's just like that much light. And
Yeah.
he's like, "Wait,
Totally.
aren't you guys in a Texas steakhouse? What the hell's happening?"
And they all have
Um,
like that crazy like top
but
lighting, like that Goodfellas casino type.
yeah,
I think it's the same cinematographer that worked with Square, like Robert Richardson, I think is his name.
oh,
And so
that makes
it looks
sense.
a lot like that for sure. Yeah, very dramatic.
When you put it in Scorsese's hands, he uses it on very specific characters. When you put
Yeah.
it on Oliver Stone's hands, there's a part where a secretary comes in to give him papers, and then she also has that.
Yeah. You're just
But
always getting into that. Yeah.
Right.
I will say, like, I'm not a huge Oliver Stone fan. This might be one of my favorite movies. It's the first time I've seen it. And I also am a huge fan of conspiracy theories. More so, like aliens exist, Bigfoot's
Totally. The fun
around,
ones. Yeah.
less so the government, and we'll talk a little bit more about why in a bit, but not like I mean, yeah, of course, QAnon. No, I'm just kidding.
Let's go.
But we'll talk about more. But like, I find it fascinating. And a lot of this movie does feel like someone kind of just breaking down the case and like the discrepancies and stuff.
Yeah, it's very
So it is,
educational feeling.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking of that, it starts off, and if you're asking yourself like, why did Oliver Stone want to make this movie? Why did he love JFK so much? And it starts off, and it was like JFK had planned to stop the embargo on Cuba, and it's like, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
No more. The mystery has been solved.
Yeah.
Like,
But also like the actual very beginning is literally Eisenhower's farewell speech being like, by the way, the military industrial complex is like ruining America.
Yeah.
Watch out for that. And then it's like, oh, I mean that happened. He's right.
Yeah.
You know?
yeah,
Could have
he's
listened a long
also,
time ago.
damn Eisenhower. Why don't you have the reputation? Um, the it's also like, does Oliver Stone like Cuba because he's a communist, or is he a communist because of how much he likes Cuba? We'll never know. All we know is that he's constantly going to Cuba. He loves Cuba. This movie references Cuba even when they don't need to. They're just
Right.
constantly talking about Cuba.
I didn't know that Oliver Stone went to Cuba all the
Also,
time.
oh
I
yeah, he
didn't.
even did a documentary about being in Cuba and how much like Fidel Castro. I mean, he's
What?
a libertarian.
Yeah.
He's like the most libertarian socialist you've ever met. His politics are very weird.
Yeah.
It makes sense because like Castro, if you take away the politics, Castro's like the one guy who like successfully kicked the U.S. out of his country and like
Yeah.
stayed that way for like 70 years. And I feel like Oliver Stone would be like, oh, he's like such a scrappy underdog,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Which
And he
is like,
is. I mean, it's true.
also, before we get too far into it, imagine it's 1991 and you go into a theater and you bought a ticket to a movie called JFK, and you're like, "Oh, I've always wanted to learn more about the president that just got killed or that
Yeah.
got killed 20 years ago. I'm so happy to watch this movie." And then this plays for 3 hours. You're like, okay, that's not what I thought it was gonna be about. Um, and then I will say one more thing. So the first 30 minutes of this movie is just Kevin Costner watching TVs,
Yeah,
different TVs.
yeah,
Like
Yeah, it's
there, it gets to the point where there was if you haven't watched this movie and you want to, when you're watching it, if you think that there's a subplot where Kevin Costner will kill a politician every time the TV is on, but he's not paying attention to it, that works every single time because almost every single scene is him doing something else, and the TV's on,
yeah.
and then someone's like, "Oh my god, they just killed a Kennedy," and he's like,
Oh my God,
"What?"
this is basic.
yeah.
They did it
That
again.
is like, I guess,
Everyone
like
gets killed in this
that's how
movie.
it would happen, I guess, in a weird way. Like they were going through a 9/11 style event every like few months for a while there.
Yeah, for real.
There was, I will say, this movie, stacked with really good actors, and is really well acted. But the very first scene Kevin Costner's in, when his secretary resident is like, "Someone shot the president." He's like, "Oh no!" Just like, what?
Literally.
You could have played this differently.
Yeah,
But by the way, he does not say "oh no." He says no" in the most like
Oh
subtle
right,
no,
right.
tone. He's
yeah.
clearly like doing buckhorn leghorn like the entire time.
But
He's
we
like,
should
"I
set.
Yeah.
declare that this Kennedy man might not have gotten killed." It's like,
I've got a lot of
all
things
But
to
right,
like,
you can do it
declare.
that way.
You will be able to
half
declare
the
my
actors in this movie have Cajun
views.
accents,
Yeah,
and sometimes it's like, wow, I didn't think Joe Pesci could do that, but it
yeah.
works. Fair
It
enough.
takes a minute to
I
get
will
used to
say
it,
that
I think.
Yeah.
half the actors in this movie have Cajun accents, and 90% of the actors are from New York with the thickest New York
Yeah,
accents you've ever
for real.
heard. Right? Like Joe Pesci, you shouldn't be getting out accented by John Candy, but this is where we are.
Dude, John Candy's bit role.
He's
That's
so
so
good.
funny.
This might be. I do like anyone who's watching. If you don't know who John Candy is, he made like Uncle Buck. He's in Home Alone.
Hmm.
But like people talk about him like he's one of the best actors. And this is why, like, I've never seen a role, even if he's in a bad movie, I've never seen a role that John Candy did where he didn't do a good job.
Yeah,
And if you see like how John Candy looks, you're definitely not like, oh yeah, this guy can definitely play like a weird two-timing or New Orleans
right.
shakedown artist who's scared to get killed. But he pulls it
Yeah,
off, and he's like one of my favorite parts in that whole
That's what I'm
movie.
yeah,
saying.
dude.
Like almost everyone's going at like Tommy Lee Jones is like a Southern dandy,
Hmm.
like who like runs like a gay nightclub, and you're just like, oh my god, how is he doing this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
he does
would
a great
never
job.
expect
Yeah.
this to work with him. Yeah.
Also, it's very funny. My notes, it says it's been like 18 minutes and they've only been watching TVs. And then my next note is the first 30 minutes is legit them just watching TVs.
Yeah.
And then
But
there's a part where he meets Joe Pesci because Joe Pesci is the one who kind of starts to break things down. Like they meet and then
Yeah,
he kind of hints that
he's like the
there might
first
be
one. He's
more.
like the first break in the chain. Yeah,
Yeah. And they meet Joe Pesci, and Joe Pesci's like, "Hello, we met like years ago." And then Kevin Costner's like, "Oh, I remember. Hard to forget a face like yours." And it's like, you're on his side. Why don't you just call him ugly?
yeah.
you need this man.
He's like, "Those eyebrows
Because
are doing you no
and this
good."
is what I didn't
I
realize
love
because
that.
every like a lot of people are wearing wigs in this. Joe Pesci is specifically playing a man who has alopecia, so he's wearing a bad fake wig and
Right.
eyebrows. But you don't realize that at first. You're just like, did they just really mess up Joe
Right,
Pesci's
right.
wig?
Yeah.
He looks insane.
You know,
Yeah.
because you don't know,
And
and it's like a red hair wig.
Yeah,
to kind of also to kind of like sum up what this movie's conspiracy theory is that the U.S. government may have known about it, they may have helped, but more importantly, there was like this group of kind of outcasts for one reason or another, whether they were communists, whether they were homosexuals, whatever they were. It was largely made up of homosexual men, and they decided to kill Kennedy because they had alliance to more communist circles, and also because they didn't like being rejected for being gay. And so that's kind of one of the things, and that's the overall plot of it.
hmm,
I do like. I feel like now it was a precursor to later when it's like, oh, you can't have a conspiracy theory anymore without there being some kind of bigotry somewhere.
yeah,
His wife even calls him out on it at one point. She's like, you only want to go after them because they're gay,
Yeah,
and he's like, that's not true. It's like it's a little
yeah. And she's like,
It
consider how
is,
they
yeah.
feel, and he's like, okay, fine,
There's also,
I guess.
you also like, and this is kind of one of those things too, where you'll just kind of see scenes divorced from something, and until they come back around like an hour and a half later, because when Kennedy's shot, you see it's Ed Asner and Jack Lemmon. Ed Asner playing the most evil ex FBI agent. It's just like, I'm glad he died.
Yeah,
And Jack Lemmon's like, well, what do you mean? He's like, don't worry about it.
and then like very much in real life, he just has papers he left on the sign that says it's like a picture of Kennedy, and there's like an X on his face. He's like, "How'd you see this paper that I just left on the
right, right.
desk?" It's like for so many ways, it was very easy
Yeah,
to
we
do
got
it.
you, man.
Oh, and then there's a part where so they go like they're kind of following the trail, and they go meet Kevin Bacon, who's in prison right now, and he's kind of like he's one of the ones who he wasn't really part of it, he was just there. And so they're trying to figure out the connection between all these characters, and he has the line,
The best line in the movie.
you don't know shit because you ain't never been fucked in the
Yeah, yeah.
ass.
It's all about
Yeah,
power.
well, we should
What it
say
is.
he says you're a liberal. Then you don't know shit because you never fucked in the. And then he says ass with like the longest drawl.
Dude, Kevin
Yeah,
Bacon killed it in this movie. He had the best
if
accent of
if
anyone.
you had a movie in the 90s and you needed someone to be in prison, you're gonna pick up the phone and dial
Yeah,
Bacon. That's what
yeah.
it's
Dial B for bacon.
We also um Gary Oldman plays Lee Harvey
Oh
Oswald, the
yeah,
most
yeah, yeah, yeah.
innocent Lee Harvey Oswald of all
The most
time,
what?
we should say. He's like, I don't know
Oh, I'm a
nothing.
patsy.
yeah. I thought I got shot by I thought I shot a police is what they're telling me. It's like, okay. We got it, Oswald.
Yeah.
Which in even in this world, we'll talk about it. Go ahead, Josh.
Well, no, like it is funny just because it's like you know right away what Oliver Stone's framing of this is. Like, Oswald's a patsy, and then this other group of guys did it, but it's like based on the evidence in the movie, Oswald was definitely still
Yeah, he was
involved.
there at
Well,
the meetings and everything, right?
because that's what they're saying. They're saying that they heard about this plan that Oswald was going to try to kill the president, and they kind of steered him on how to do it. And in one of my like, I've also I did a paper about conspiracies in about the Kennedy assassination specifically, and I saw this, but I didn't really understand it until I saw this movie. So that they're saying is that when JFK, like they originally had an original plan, but then the CIA kind of changed them to do a plan where they would shoot him where he got shot, and it was a harder shot that Oswald could not pull off from the book depository. But the reason they wanted him to wait is because it allowed the grassy knoll and two other guys to be on all four corners of that little stretch of road, and they were all going to take shots and shoot Kennedy to make sure he got
Right.
killed, and that's the government's involvement. And so, and that's kind of what Josh is saying. Like in this theory that he has, yes, Oswald did not kill Kennedy, but he was a pretty big part of
Right.
trying
He
to shoot
shot
at
a gun
Kennedy.
at him.
Yeah,
Attempted murder
Oh, I
at
don't know
least.
what's
set
going
up.
on.
Well, and it's also funny, like, and I think this is kind of one of those things too, where if you do like tumble down the rabbit hole of every weird thing that going on with the Kennedy assassination, I mean, it literally you could spend hours just being like, what is
Yeah.
this? This is like insane. Like, um, but you know how it's like, obviously, like Oswald was arrested and then immediately killed by like a club
Yeah.
owner, Jack Ruby, who's like tied to the mob. The movie's not concerned with that at all. They're like, the mob's not involved. Don't worry about that. That is not
Right.
important.
They're like, the
Focus
mob's
on
not
these four
involved,
gay
all
Yeah,
right?
guys.
exactly.
but I do think this is also kind of one of those things too where I think with conspiracies, and this is almost the tricky thing, because obviously you see like the end result is like a full blown QAnon person today is just like ruins their lives like
Yeah,
thinking about
yeah.
this. But I also think there's kind of a tendency to be like, you look at like weird facts about like, oh, it is really weird that in real life, like factually, Lee Harvey Oswald lived in Russia, defected to Russia for 2 years, came back married to like a Soviet Russian woman, and then like it was fine. The military's like, that's cool.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, That's really weird. Something like there's something to that, but it's almost one of those things where when you stumble across like really weird stuff like that, you want to make way more. You're like, well, then it's all one big conspiracy. It's
Yeah,
like, well, it could also be like three different weird things happening separately. You know, like I don't know. It is tricky, and I feel like this movie is like, no, it was all connected.
right.
You know.
And I think, well, and so that kind of leads into what I wanted to say earlier. So then he goes to Garrison goes to Washington D.C. and he meets with Donald Sutherland, who's playing like he's
Oh,
playing like
I
Yeah,
love
he's
this
great.
scene.
he was a military guy who was supposed to who's kind of in charge of all the security for the presidents, and he's saying that like they sent him off on like a goodwill mission for no reason, and that allowed a lot of the people to like there was less Secret Service, there was less pre-boarding like checking on stuff, there was less like maintenance. And his point, like there's literally a point. Oh, before I talk about his point, there's a part where he calls him Bubba. He's like, you're very close,
Bubba. Yeah,
Bubba.
it's up to you, Bubba.
And this is this is the most call characters random names movie I've
Yeah,
ever seen. Because like when Candy calls Kevin Costner Daddy-O, uh,
Hey,
Costner calls him
Daddy-O. Yeah.
Bubba. He's like, you got to get the stick,
yeah.
Daddy-O. This is the big in time.
Bubba was so
But
good.
to
I
get
love
back to
Bubba
the
so much.
scene, and I was
I
like,
know.
Bubba.
To be
I
honest with you,
think
like
it's got
I don't
something.
know if this is the first ever like conspiracy meeting, but it's literally them on like a park bench, and Donald Sutherland's character doesn't even have a name. It's just Mr.
Yeah, I could give you a
X.
fake name, but I'll go by Mr. X.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and
uh,
so
yeah,
is supposed to start selling doubt in the government. He's saying like, okay, we did all this stuff that we don't normally do, and he literally like asked Kevin Costner. He goes, "You think these are all coincidences? Of course not." It's like you think the Secret Service would be this incompetent? Of course not. And this is kind of my problem with a lot of these government conspiracy theories. Do I think the Secret Service is this
Well,
incompetent? That's not going to be of course
let's not
not
ask
for
that
me. That's
question.
going to
Next.
be
Pass.
so true.
Pass.
And it's like, yeah, I feel like a lot of these conspiracies, they don't like use they don't put things in context. Like that guy who shot at Trump, do I think that that guy was working with the government, or do I think the Secret Service was just lazy and didn't do all the
Yeah,
yeah. They
requirements?
didn't do all the
right.
sweeps, or
Very possible.
yeah,
And
yeah, or like they were supposed to work with local PD and someone didn't call it. Like, there's so many
right,
ways it could
Yeah.
have gone wrong.
and you realize like as you get older that a lot of government like conspiracies is just governments being so like a lot of the times when stuff goes good in any like high pressure situation, it's because of
Right.
luck a lot
Right.
more so
Yeah, and
than
like as you get
Right.
older, you've like worked
and
with
so
people, and
like
you're like, everyone kind of sucks. Nobody really wants to do anything except for like
yeah,
the president, someone who's like at that level. But it's like the regular
right,
person. Like I've messed up on every single job I've ever worked, constantly. So is everyone
right,
else.
and it's that even you at home who's probably put on a party, there's probably been something very important you
Right.
forgot to do, and you're like, how did I forget to get
Yeah.
ice? Someone go get ice. That's kind of like what everyone's metric is at
Yeah.
all times, and so it's like, why do we forget to call the local police to make sure that the grassy knoll was
Right.
checked? Was it because of a grand conspiracy,
Just
or was it because we're
incompetence.
just
Yeah.
lazy Secret Service?
Yeah, I also think like too, like, because it is very much like I do like it's like do I think the military like industrial complex hated Kennedy? It's like yeah, but it's probably like they're like, oh, we hope he dies. Not we're gonna set this up, but who
Yeah.
cares either way. So
Right.
it's like
Yeah.
if you're some general who wasn't involved, you're like, oh good, I'm glad he died, so we can like invade this country
Yeah.
now. You know?
Yeah, and there is that always that thing. I mean, Kennedy did one of the reasons that people love or he's so revered is that he had picked Lyndon B. Johnson, who was his conservative running opponent, to be his vice president. And his thought was like, oh, I'll work with a conservative so that we can better lead the country,
Like
Yeah.
bridge the
Yeah.
which
gap.
which didn't work then, and it
Yeah.
hasn't
It
worked since, and we're still trying to.
was a novel idea.
Yeah, Democrats stop doing that forever. I don't know why you're
Let's have a
still.
conspiracy theory where you stop doing
Yeah.
that shit.
Everything works out.
Um, but yeah, and then okay, so one of my favorite scene, and then he comes back, and then Robert F. Kennedy gets killed,
Yeah.
and
Off
then
screen again.
his like, he had before he leaves, he has a fight with his wife where she's like, "All you care about is this conspiracy. You don't care about our
Yeah.
family." And then he comes back and he watches it on TV, the Robert F. Kennedy, and then he wakes up his wife and he's like, "They just killed Robert." I would say that the wife should have
Yeah,
left.
I
At
thought
that,
she was
like,
going
why are you
to.
You
waking?
know what's funny is the wife is like, you're right. I'm like 100% with you for the
I
rest of
know.
this because like they killed Robert F. Kennedy, but it's like, no, your life's clearly even more danger if he's
Yeah,
correct.
yeah.
What is this?
Yeah,
They like kind of touch on that.
Um,
Like, I don't know. I don't. Their movie was so long, anyways, and it's so full of information that like they probably couldn't do that many more family scenes, where it would just be like a TV series at that point. But it's like that was a
right.
pretty powerful scene. Whenever she's just like, "Dude, you're putting our kids in danger. Like, this is insane. Like, you can't be doing this. This is wild. I'm gonna go." It's like that was pretty. It was like a compelling scene. It's like one of Sissy SpaceX like only scenes. But then you're totally right. Like the next morning, whenever RFK dies, and he like wakes her up, and she's like happy again, and then she's just like, "Oh, both of those brothers," and it's just like,
I think they
Yeah,
literally sleep
dude,
together in
yeah,
that scene. She's
yeah.
like, you're right.
It's like that was so. I don't know. I don't really want them to go more into the family stuff, but like it was just kind of like a goofy moment. It was just like, okay, this is an easy
It is
marriage.
tricky,
I
yeah.
do think that. Yeah, there's a couple of times where they kind of hint at how weird this whole situation would be, not just for his wife but his coworkers. Where it's like, you're going to law school, you join a law firm. You're working for the
Yeah,
DA. You don't especially think you're going to be reopening the Warren Commission while you're at work,
Yeah,
and like
and
getting
we should
threats
say
by
that like
FBI
right.
agents. You know?
the whole thing is like because first it's okay, like structurally first it's Kennedy gets shot,
Hmm.
and then it's like 3 years later this lawyer is just on a plane to DC talking to some senator who's like, hey, isn't all that
Yeah,
stuff weird? And then the lawyer's like,
It's the day
oh
they closed the Warren Commission. They said they didn't find anything.
oh yeah, yeah, and but he's like, oh, why didn't they do this and this? And then he's like, you know what, that is true. So he's like asking his team to like do it. Um, and then that's kind of when they're like, okay, well, we're gonna like we have enough here to try to charge these guys with conspiracy, but it's also like even if one of those guys was like found guilty, the government wouldn't have to reopen. Like that's not how that would work. Like that wouldn't just reopen it. That's just weird. It's weirdly wishful thinking even within the film. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like
Right.
it's like, oh, this will be the domino, and it's almost like such a desperate Hail Mary that it's like I don't even think this would have worked if like the trial had been
right,
successful. You
right.
know, I don't know. It's just like
Well,
It's like trying
legally
to
that
take down the whole
doesn't.
government with like one
Yeah.
court case.
right. And they're looking for this mysterious person who was kind of the ringleader who got Oswald involved, who got all these people involved, and we know who it is because it's played by Tommy Lee Jones, and they keep
Yeah,
referring to him, but they don't know who it is, and eventually they figure it out and they go talk to him on Easter Sunday, which is so funny because like there's another scene where they're like, "Oh, you're gonna meet with him," and he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna meet with him on a Sunday," and then his wife is like, "Why did you pick Easter
yeah,
Sunday?" And he's like, "It had to be a Sunday," and it's like, okay, but you picked the
right,
day.
right.
Yeah.
You're bad. But then
Yeah.
he goes and tells them, and he's like, "Oh, I think you might have helped orchestrate the Kennedy assassination." And like, Tommy Lee Jones is like, "I don't think
That,
so."
that wasn't me.
And then
That was
his
some other
Yeah.
whole
guy.
scene is like, "Can you believe he's lying?" And he's like,
Right.
"Of course." Like,
Oh, y'all got
I
Tony
think you
y'all.
mean
Did you guys see the letter on my desk?
Tommy. I think you mean Tommy Lee Jones goes, "No, sir, I do not believe I was involved. Have some
Yeah.
etouffee." Like
Would
the
you
most
like some
I know. I
Cajun
think I
gay
ordered
man
a big old
alive.
plate of
Yeah,
Yeah.
bacon. Is he still in prison? I'll wait.
yeah. He's like, "Thank you for seeing me on the
Yes.
Sunday."
Um, what's also they also kind of have we haven't talked about it, but two of his I guess like young attorneys I think well he has like three they're three they're all kind
Their
of famous
faces, yeah.
actors. One is
Oh
Wayne Knight
yeah.
is just like
Yeah,
is
Newman.
yeah Newman is part of his thing, and then Michael Rooker with hair, which is very like I've never seen Michael
Yeah.
Rooker have hair. Um, and then there's a girl and she's also someone, but I can't.
Oh, it's a girl. It's a sister from Roseanne.
Oh
Really?
yeah.
Yeah. He's also an
But
Uncle Buck. It's an Uncle
the,
Buck
Yeah.
reunion.
there's some minor drama because as they're like digging deeper into this case, Michael Rooker's like, wait a second, are you saying the FBI might have been involved? And he's like outraged. It's like, yeah, what did you
Right. Have
think
you
we
been
were
paying attention
doing?
at all?
he's like, he's like, hey, I think these gay guys did it. I don't think any government officials were involved. It's like,
Yeah.
yes. And so he like quits. Yeah.
Well, you do find out that he was an informant for the FBI, so he's trying to steer them
He's trying to
away.
get them away. Right. Cause all this evidence points to Ed Asner, who's died.
Yeah.
And they're like, isn't that mysterious? It's like, well, he was an elderly alcoholic,
Yeah.
so I don't know if it was mysterious
He
or
was an
just.
80-year-old
Right. Right.
alcoholic who was
But
beating up black women. So I'm
Yeah.
pretty
but
sure he had.
but then and then there is weird stuff happens because they talk to Joe Pesci and then like a few months later Joe Pesci's found dead like of
Right.
suicide maybe um the one time you see him without the wig and the so you're like okay if I was the lawyer working on this I would be like yeah something's definitely going
Right.
on like a
Yeah.
cover up so it's almost like hard to fault Kevin Costner for his conclusions
Yeah.
here
Right, right. And so yeah, so then eventually they do put Tommy Lee Jones on trial, like they arrest him and they're gonna like prove it. And this is where like the most which is funny because having not seen this movie, I didn't realize A, how short the courtroom part is. It's literally like the last 10,
Yeah.
20
Yeah.
minutes of the movie. And B,
yeah.
so there's that famous scene where Jerry Seinfeld in Seinfeld recreates the JFK
The
thing
magic
with
bullet.
spit. Yeah, it's like, oh, this guy spit
Oh,
on us.
Yeah.
game night
Like, it has
again.
to go from here to here. And it's funny that I didn't realize until I watched this movie that the reason that they specifically do that is because it's the same actor in Wayne Knight.
Right.
He plays the same exact role, which
Yeah.
makes it even funnier. And it makes me wonder, like, did they watch that movie and they're like, oh, let's
Yeah.
do that with Wayne?
That magic bullet.
Yeah, because
And
it was they were being spit on at a parking lot, right? And it was like it was a
no,
second
in a
spitter
baseball game,
at the baseball game. Yeah.
they both claim they got hit, and he's like, "How did you get hit if you just
Yeah.
did this?" Um, and there's also one thing that I forgot to mention earlier is that before this movie came out, the Zapruder tape, the one we've all seen of Kennedy getting shot, that was not available to the public. He did a Opens Records request to get that to put it in the film, and
Right. I
afterwards,
remember hearing about that.
that's when it
Yeah.
got released. And it's especially funny watching this movie because I mean, we were alive when the internet was
Yeah.
a baby. So I saw that Zaruda tape when I was like
Right.
in fifth
Right.
grade on like
Yeah.
rotten.com.
Right.
But it's funny how tasteful Oliver Stone does. Like he barely shows
Not,
the tape. He doesn't show any of the
not like not
gruesome
zoomed
stuff,
in.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
very reverential because
Yeah.
they'll even do there's like some scenes where the medical examiner's like interrogated like, or like on the witness stand and then you'll never see Kennedy. You'll at most see part of his side like as he's lying on the table like you never see Kennedy and it is obviously
Yeah.
like intentional.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, there's a part where he's in trial and Kevin Costner goes, "Your king
Yeah.
has fallen." It's like, okay, Oliver,
Yeah,
who
but
can
like
that
but like
is?
seriously, if you're on a criminal trial and the lawyer he's openly crying by the way,
Right.
like in
Yeah,
the courtroom being like, "Remember your
This
king."
is
I'd be like, "Ah,
insane.
your fallen king is alive.
this lawyer's gotta."
Yeah.
I also like there's parts during the trial where some of his witnesses are like, yeah, I saw that gay guy walk into that clubhouse and it's like a visibly on
Right.
crack like crackhead and you're like, yeah, this is clearly not a
Right.
reliable witness,
Yeah.
Kevin. And apparently the DA did that in real life.
Oh wow.
like,
Yeah.
constantly. You're just like, oh, this guy's just packing the courtroom with bad
Yeah.
evidence.
We know Oliver
So
Stone uncovered the video of the Zapruder.
you
And
know.
he made use of it for sure. Like there was like the whole montage of just like the zoo. I think I've seen the Kennedy headshot
Yeah.
maybe 1 million times in my life now. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
no.
it's if now to show you how desensitized we've been. Like you can probably find
Yeah.
it.
That was
Like,
someone did a Steam game based on the Zapruder tape of like, can you hit him from the book
Oh.
depository? And
but see,
very difficult. Yeah.
and that's that. But that guy, he made that very specifically. See, I tell you, I know a lot about this assassination. He made that to kind of prove the point that there's no way Oswald could have
Yeah.
made those shots. And
Three
the
in a
whole
row is crazy.
Yeah,
Like
he
that.
made that game, and he tells you that anyone who plays it, I think if you can copy what Oswald did, he'll give you $10,000. But so far, that game's like 10 years old. No
Right.
one has ever
Yeah,
been able to
Yeah.
JFK Reloaded. Yeah,
I don't know. I never played
I've
it
never
either. I
actually
remember it coming
played
do
it.
out
that.
I'm
though. It
just
was like a
aware of it.
pretty big splash.
Controversial. Yeah. It is a controversial thing, but it
Yeah,
does make his point that
totally.
he's trying to make.
Yeah, and that is almost one of those things too, where in a way, like I mean, I think this is a really well made movie, and if you just watched it on its own, you're like, that's great. But if you like know a little bit more about like just all the weird inconsistencies of the Kennedy thing, it is frustrating to be like, oh, why'd they cover this but not this but not this? Because there is enough weird, sketchy evidence to be like, yeah, clearly something
Yeah,
else was going on, even if you don't know what it is, and even if it wasn't these gay guys,
right, right.
something was up.
And I think that that ends up being the thing is that Oliver's it's kind of like you almost wish that he had done more of a Zodiac call to it where he's more so presenting the facts and he's leaning towards what he thinks, but he
Totally.
doesn't
Yeah,
outright tell you. Because in this one, I think that ends up becoming not only the issue with this, but also with conspiracy theories in general, is that if you're so set forward on this is how it happened for real, once people start poking holes in it, the
right.
whole thing falls apart
You don't know.
because you just said this
Yeah,
whole thing was real. Yeah. Like if you say that 9/11 was an inside job because of steel beams, and then it's been proven that steel beams can melt,
right.
you're just shit out of luck. Like you can't go back. And so I think that, but at the same time, again, like it's kind of the similar to why I was defending Megalopolis so much. You know, I don't necessarily want to see my views reflected back at me every time. Sometimes I want to see a crazy Cuban expats, Vietnam
Yeah.
cocaine bender writer telling me what he
Hell
thinks
yeah,
about the
man.
Kennedy
For 3 hours. Yeah,
assassination for 3 and
Yeah, you want to see a movie that would have never survived the MCU
totally.
like film
Yeah, yeah.
process, like
right,
get put
right.
on screen, where
I
they would
just
have
want to
just changed
see.
everything.
I just want to go back in time and have Oliver Stone pitch this to Kevin Feige and
Right,
have his
right.
like brain
It's just
explode.
like, but where's the break into Act Two, sir? I'm not seeing it anywhere.
Yeah. Also, I was gonna. So we saw the theatrical cut. There's a director's cut that adds an extra 30 minutes, and I didn't watch that one just because we were trying to like see the his first vision. But I will say it would be very funny if you watch the director's cut, and in the director's cut he just blatantly says like, "Oh yeah,
Yeah,
it was the Bush
it's
family."
like a new scene of
I mean, Bush.
Only
They don't even. I don't even think they covered the movie, but Bush was in Dallas that
oh
day, weirdly, or he
well,
was in Texas.
no, that's not the weird part. I mean, the Bushes are from
yeah,
Texas. That's the whole thing.
Well, he was also the head of the FBI at the
It's more
time,
so that they're the head of the
the
FBI. They're in
CIA.
charge of, and according to sources, about 2 weeks before he had dinner with Lee Harvey Oswald, there's evidence that suggests that Lee Harvey Oswald and the Bushes were more than friendly, that they knew each other in a real way. But again, there's not solid leads. But that's why
Right,
people always bring up. And then, of course, you see, El, you see, the succession of presidents, and it's like, okay, I can see how
yeah.
Bush would be involved and how he got a presidency out of it.
yeah, but Bush was president when
I
this
believe
movie came
so.
out,
Must have
right?
been. Yeah.
Yeah.
1991, I think so.
HW, yeah. So that
That was
that,
the
that could
last.
have also been like, hey, let's not
Right,
accuse the
right,
sitting
right.
president of murder. that might have been too far even for
Yeah,
91 Oliver Stone.
Although Oliver Stone, if he had done it, maybe he wouldn't have had to sit through the other big conspiracy when his son stole an
yeah.
election like 2 years later. But
That is true,
neither
and
here
that one
nor
was
there.
blatant, and I 100% believe it.
Yeah.
I never saw that movie
It was
W. I
okay.
assume it wasn't great. Also Oliver Stone.
So it's kind of like he does this weird thing where he decides to be unbiased, and it's very like presented as like, here's what this is, here's how he lived, and it's like,
Dude,
why
I
the hell
know.
are you being
It felt so
unbiased on
pointless. It was just
Bush?
like, why am I
Yeah,
like? There was so much controversy for this movie, and this is like nothing.
which is funny because like this JFK is the
Right.
most biased movie of all time. It's like, no, here's what happened, and you're like, no, take a side. Like
Hmm.
that's more
Um,
interesting.
and especially like, yeah, it's just such a weird, like, I don't ever want to see a biopic of a president without a
Right.
point of view. Like, whether you love him or him, that's the whole
Exactly.
point of
It was
you
all. It
telling
also
a
came out
story.
like just as Bush was leaving office, and it's like I could almost see if this was like 20 years removed, how this might be like something. But no, people are still
Yeah.
charged up about this.
Yeah.
You want to hear a good crazy
Of
conspiracy
course.
connection to bring this around to the modern day? For some reason, QAnon thinks that JFK lived, or no, they think
Oh yeah.
JFK, they think JFK Jr., his son, lived. He didn't die in the plane crash. He faked his death, and for some reason they think it's this guy Vincent Fuqua who hangs around Trump rallies, who looks nothing like JFK or his son at all. So I don't know why. But the day that that random crazy kid tried to shoot Trump, Vincent Fuqua is in the stands behind Trump at the rally,
Oh,
and you're
weird.
like, "Oh man, this must have just
Yeah.
lit the QAnon brains on
Yeah.
like fire completely."
Yeah.
And you know, obviously, this is just some guy they've latched onto, so none of it matters. But I did recognize him, and I
Damn,
was
that's
like,
so weird.
ah, that's pretty funny. So,
Yeah. And I do think that that the whole movie is a good case study in that very situation where, like, right now the Trump people, they love JFK and they're like, oh yeah, at one point they thought JFK Jr. was going to be Trump's running mate because he wasn't dead. He was going to come back to life, tell people he loved Trump, and it was like, okay, but even if you thought that this was true, that JFK Jr. was still alive, in what world is JFK Jr. going to align
Right,
himself
right.
with the
That's
conservatives?
insane.
Like, what are you talking? You think a lot of that comes from this kind of the way that Oliver Stone did view JFK, where he clearly
Yeah,
like reveres him almost as a god. And so it becomes that thing where it's like when someone is like, you see that with MLK a lot, where people don't even like listen to MLK speeches anymore, and they're like, "Oh, MLK wanted equality," and it's like, yes, but he wanted
yeah,
it in a very specific way that also leaned towards
yeah.
capitalism that you guys don't want to talk about. Um,
right,
and so it becomes this thing where like there's that myth and the truth, and I think in a way this movie is kind of trying to break that. Like there's that myth of, you know, he was killed by just a random communist, and did that really happen? And let's get to the truth of it. But it's funny in doing that, he's also like giving this like fairy tale version of JFK who
Right,
was like
right.
perfect in every way.
Yeah.
right. The symbol like becomes well, and that's why like it's like I I don't know. Did people see JFK as their like king? Because I've never thought of any president that way, and maybe that's just because like politics is
I
so
bet it's a
jaded
mix of
since
some
then.
way.
But the idea that people are like our fallen
Yeah,
king is
yeah.
like crazy to me, you
I
know.
mean, they and see that's the problem, is that people don't know this stuff anymore, because I mean the JFK presidency was referred to as America's Camelot with Jack
Oh
Hill
yeah,
and with
that's right.
JFK and with Robert F. Kennedy um, being the head of the FBI. There was that process that people even back in the day thought that JFK was this kind of, he was going to usher in this new world
Yeah.
of like prosperity. And so, and you know what? To be honest, like if you look at his politics, a lot of the stuff he did was good. A lot of the stuff he did build that, and I understand why he has that reputation. Not to take away from JFK, but also I think it's more so that thing where it's like if you follow these big figures like MLK, Malcolm X, JFK, you do have to see what they're actually saying, because a lot of them are pushing towards
Right,
away
right.
from capitalism, which is why they don't talk about it. But I think that that's important, especially now, especially as we see whoever won the election, it was always going to be more of a steady
Sure.
march towards capitalism and away from socialism, and we need to kind of get back
Yeah.
to helping each other out, which is essentially what this is about. It's about kind of finding the truth. I do. We don't have, we've been talking about this movie for a while. There is one funny thing that I forgot to mention. We'll talk about it now. There's an underlining, this is not a joke theme. There is an underlining thing that I don't even think Oliver Stone realizes, where at multiple points they are kind of showing the incompetence of the government. Like there's a part where Joe Pesci, they found like someone gets released in the paper that he's kind of helping the investigation, and so he's scared out of his mind, and then he like calls Kevin Costner, like, I need help. And then he's like, we'll protect you. Just come meet us at this hotel. And then they meet him at the hotel, and they have a long conversation about how they really can't help him. And he's kind of shit on his own. And then he dies like within the day. And it's like, oh yeah, like everyone in this movie is telling a Garrison, like, you don't know what you're going
Hmm.
up against, you don't know what you're doing, you're gonna get a lot of people killed. And through the course of the movie, they are constantly proven right, because multiple people from Jack Ruby to Jack Lemon's character to Joe Pesci's character
Yeah.
are mysteriously killed, and every single time, like Kevin Costner not only doesn't can't save them, or he doesn't save them, he doesn't even have the ability to save them. And I think like that's why the government is able to get away with a lot of this stuff, or big corporations, or anyone who has a lot of power is able to get away with a lot of this, because the people who are investigating, like, yeah, the truth is good, Kevin Costner, but John Candy
Right.
doesn't want to get
Right.
murdered in the back alley, so he's
Yeah.
probably going
Right.
to continue to lie, you know. And I think that to me that was what made it even more interesting, was seeing this disconnect from how big, if you were going to kill the president of the United States, how much resources and how much like callousness you would need to do that, and how you would go up against that as
Right.
like a
It's
DA
impossible.
in New
Yeah.
Orleans who has no
Yeah.
power. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why I think the movie ends up working, even if you don't believe necessarily in the conspiracy theory or in his particular conspiracy theory, because it's
Hmm.
still a David and Goliath story, and it's still kind of saying that we can only do as much as we possibly can. Not to say we shouldn't do it, but it also means that like every once in a while we're going to go up against a
Totally.
beast
Yeah.
that we can't stop. You know?
I also think too, like there's almost this, and I think like in like the kind of the more, oh, everyone has a smartphone these days, so it's like a lot of stuff that like bad wrongdoing by like law enforcement and the government and stuff will get recorded and released instantly, and still like
Yeah.
no one really cares. There's like, yeah, but I like this, I like the
Did this
cops, so
thing.
I don't
Yeah.
care that they like shot this person. So it's just like, oh, so even with
Totally.
evidence, it really doesn't matter,
Yeah. And
and I
in
think
that
that's
movie
kind of the
Nixon
tricky
too,
thing.
like
Yeah.
kind of going
Yeah.
off both of these points. There's a scene in Nixon where who plays Nixon? Oh, Anthony Hopkins, another Oliver Stone banger. And he's at the Lincoln Memorial and he's talking to this like hippie girl, and he's like, "Hey, I'm Richard Nixon." And she's like, "You know what? I used to hate you, and I thought that you were a really bad man, but then I realized that you're not even really in charge, and you're just the spokesman for like a faceless committee of people that are like running the world." And it's just like that's pretty true, and it's like that's kind of going back exactly for like JFK's case, like everything is just so much bigger than we are, and that's why conspiracies are just like so impenetrable because they don't want us to know, and they're really good at not letting us know. And yeah, it's just like it's like the scariest part about the government is that they are just so big and smart. Well, not even smart, but just big.
Right.
It's just
Just
kind of
big.
like
Yeah.
insurmountable. Yeah. No, I almost wonder like, and Avi, I'm sure there's been a million books written about this, but I think too this is almost like the tricky thing with like Boomer seeing like Oliver Stone seeing like JFK as like a Christ-like figure. But if he had lived, I also don't think he would usher in a new golden age. I think it would have been kind of the Obama thing where it's like, oh, he
Yeah.
did a few good
You only get
things
four
and then just
years.
kind of left. You know?
Well, I don't know. He was on the verge of ending the CIA, and he was about to like desanction the Cuba stuff. I mean, it's a pretty big
I don't
deal. I
know.
think
Could he have made the
this,
CIA? Like, I don't know.
well, he
Right.
couldn't have.
They
Like,
did
look
not
at what
want
I
that to happen.
like. But if he
Right. I
Don't
mean,
mess
yeah,
with
no,
CIA.
yeah.
I mean, he could have. If you try to take on the CIA, your
Right.
whole
Yeah. You
lineage
get
ends
brain
up in
parasites.
fucking water. I don't know if you what they
RFK's still
Yeah.
around, so and he's doing really good. So
no,
prove me wrong.
RFK has done more to hurt the Kennedys than any of
He's
the
the
Bush
real
stuff.
magic bullet.
Not
I
to get too
think
political. Yeah,
him talking about the
Yeah.
benefits of raw milk, that's the magic bullet. Yeah.
um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's a little bit distasteful to talk about how Kennedy might have failed in his
Well, I don't know. I just think
career.
I think the optimism Boomers had for Kennedy is because it's a martyr is always going to be bigger than the real person, and I feel like if he had lived to like 90 and stuff, it would have been like, oh, he did some good, did some bad, like every president. I mean, not every president did some good, but you know what I mean. There was never like a perfect run for
Yeah.
presidents.
Right, right. But I
Yeah.
don't think the people in even in the 70s were like, oh, he's going to be perfect in every way. He was
Yeah. That
an
is true.
adulterer
Yeah.
who,
I think
again,
Kevin
now,
Costner believed that while
yeah.
he
If
was
you're not
weeping.
okay, other than the city of New Orleans, for some reason, everyone else, because you do. I mean, it is that thing, and who knows whether it was Kennedy or his administration or what it was. But with Kennedy, we did win the space race. We did stop the Cold War at the Bay of Pigs. there was so many times where I don't think another president could have done what Kennedy was doing in terms of getting us like the Russians were ready to attack and we were able to stop in that 13 days.
Well,
Another movie by Kevin Costner. Um, and so I don't know. I don't like what are your hints that this wouldn't have happened? I don't understand
I
what
get, I guess maybe because I was born, into the current
you
age
don't even know that they
where
were called Camelot. I don't know why you're acting as if
I just, maybe there was a great like cultural shift that he would have led if he hadn't died. Um, but I guess maybe I just like look at all the hope and change stuff with Obama that didn't really happen, and I just assume that like, okay, this would have been like petered out, or the government would have like only done a little bit of it, or whatever, because the government's so big that you can't like shift it in such a dramatic way
Yeah,
as like one or two people. You know what I mean? That's what I'm thinking. Like the
yeah,
bureaucracy's too big and
and
entrenched.
it is also that thing where like I want to say like, oh well, Obama wasn't able to get as much done because of McConnell and the Congress, but who's to say that
yeah,
that's not also the case for Kennedy? Like how much of that stuff was budget
Yeah, or like people who would
want?
defect, like how like the Democrats are like, oh, we can't do anything because of mansion. It's like who knows? There would have been like five mansions back then, being like,
yeah,
well, I'm voting with the Republicans, so I
And
don't know.
there's also like that thing where it's that thing you never even hear of where like we think of the space race as the whole country was on board, but then you remember that like or you see pictures and there were people protesting saying this is a waste of taxpayer money. There's no reason for this, and it is that thing where like who knows if his policies would have been as popular as they are now because now we can look back and be like, yeah, I kind of wish we
yeah.
had
Would have
dismantled the
been cool.
CIA 30 years ago.
I mean, yeah, of course
Yeah,
that would have been amazing. I just, yeah,
But well, thank you guys. This is on our very non-political
yeah.
podcast, so we
We
definitely
stayed
would
pretty
not
neutral the whole
succeeded at
time.
where where we see on Joe Rogan, he's gonna have Trump. On this podcast, we're gonna discuss Kennedy's failed
We got
policies.
Oliver Stone, baby. Yeah,
So join us in 30 years. We'll get to them.
they're gonna apparently. I mean, I'm sure they actually won't for real, but they're supposed to unseal the
2038.
JFK documents in 2030. So we'll be back 5 years from now, assuming we haven't
Yeah,
all died in nuclear holocaust,
Right.
because you know,
yeah,
the way things are going.
Yeah.
We'll
yeah.
be back to do
The
JFK Part
uncovering.
2.
Yeah. And I'll be
Was
like,
he right? Was Oliver Stone correct?
we'll
Is
be
the big
back to cover
question.
JFK Part 2, where JFK Jr. comes back to life to
Hell,
lead
let's do it.
the Republican Party for some reason.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, thank you guys. This was a very different movie than we've done before, but I'm glad we got to talk about it. Hopefully, you're either excited or a little bit scared of what's going to happen. But remember, just like JFK, got to stick together. And we're next week we're going to have our end of the
Yeah,
year spectacular, the 2004 top 10. So come back for that, and we'll see you guys next time on the Bump Squad.